Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another The Path to a New Edition. Because it's that time of month when Wizards of the Coast have dropped us a new Unearthed Arcana playtest package. Now this one's supposed to be heavily based around changing the way fighters work and changing up combat to make it more interesting than just roll and hit. But we'll have a look at that on the desktop in a wee second. But before I go there, there's a couple of things I want to address. Firstly, when I released the last one of these videos, when the last playtest package came out, it was just after all the OGL scandal, and people were very pissed off at Wizards of the Coast. And I received a bunch of messages on how dare you keep supporting Wizards of the Coast by keeping these videos going. Well, I'd like to point out that I started this series long before 1D&D and these playtest packages started. I was looking back at the 2012 playtest packages of 4th edition to 5th edition, the D&D Next series. And I thought it was really interesting to look at the directions Dungeons & Dragons could have gone. And I think it still has some value looking at these playtest packages and seeing what direction they might be taking Dungeons & Dragons in. Whether they're adapting to changing games, whether they are just trying to go back to the halcyon days of the original Dungeons & Dragons box set, or whatever. I think there's value in that, and whether you hate Wizards of the Coast or not, I think it's interesting to look at the biggest game on the market. Now, the one thing you can always say about Wizards of the Coast is they have never demanded that I change what I produce, which is really different from a lot of people who hate them, who constantly demand that I stop releasing videos talking about Wizards of the Coast stuff. And I do it very, very rarely. Most of my videos are about older games. I deal with Shadowrun and FASA stuff probably twice or 3 times as much as I ever talk about Dungeons & Dragons and Wizards of the Coast. But that doesn't seem to matter. I shouldn't be talking about it. It is verboten, should never be spoken of. Well, I'm afraid I don't make these videos to be popular. Otherwise, I'd be probably making far better videos for a start. But I just want to talk about what I want to talk about, and hopefully some of you enjoy it. The second thing is, during the recent creators meeting that Wizards of the Coast had, where they invited a bunch of YouTubers and other people, influencers if you will, to their headquarters to talk about the direction the Dungeons & Dragons is going. One of the big announcements that people have been leading headlines with is that 1D&D isn't actually going to be the title of the next version of Dungeons & Dragons. And I kind of shrugged my shoulders at this because that seemed obvious. 4th edition to 5th edition, as I stated a few moments ago, the playtest packages were called D&D Next, which I liked as a title. But it was never going to be the next version. And it's obvious that these playtest packages were 1D&D. Because I don't think that Wizards of the Coast ever said that 1D&D was actually going to be the title of the next version of Dungeons & Dragons. It's just going to be these playtest packages. And it makes sense, give them a nice nifty little title, as we're trying to draw everything into one unified rule set or whatever their thoughts behind it. So that came out as an absolutely non-headline to me. But interesting to look back at how people have jumped to conclusions. But anyway, enough of me wittering on like this. Let's go over to the desktop and I can witter on in a different way talking about the playtest package. So this is the latest playtest package, playtest package 5, which came out on the 27th of April, I believe. Or at least that's when I downloaded it. Perhaps it was out a day earlier and I just missed it. But this one deals mainly with mages and warriors. And it kind of differs from the past ones, where we had the priests group of classes, and then we had the experts group of classes before that, which shared an ability. This one doesn't continue with that. The groups here are just groups. They have no special ability which is shared between them. Now, the big thing that they're revealing is how they're going to make combat, just hitting things with a sword, hacking away at your enemies, be a bit different. And I'm afraid to say, what they've discovered is feats. But let's have a look through. So, this has design notes right through it. They're going really more into details of their thoughts, and they're sharing that a lot more with us. So, instead of it having a large section at the beginning, they're broken down throughout. Anyway, what's new? Weapons, spells, feats, 5 classes, the Barbarian, Fighter, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard, and a rules glossary. So we go straight in here and we've got weapon tables. Now this looks very similar, you know, club does 1d4 bludgeoning, light, weighs 2 pounds, costs 1 silver piece, but it has a mastery here. And that's their new tactic for making weapons different. That each type of weapon has a mastery. And if you get a weapon mastery feat, or you are a fighter or a barbarian, then you can activate this ability. Now, if you're a fighter, you get 3 slots, basically. And you can attune those during a long rest. So you can have longsword, short sword, bow, for example. And then you find a cutlass that you want to start using, so you swap out during your next long rest your weapon mastery for longsword to cutlass. Barbarians only have 2 of these slots, and if you take the feat weapon mastery, you only get 1 of these slots. So the fighter is far more versatile in being able to pick up and use mastery with more weapons. Barbarian's not so good, and anybody who just wants to take the weapon mastery feat gets to use it with just 1 weapon. Now, what are these mastery abilities? Because we've got slow, nick, push, etc. Well, basically, they are feats. And what gave that away to me was the fact that the halberd here has cleave. Now, anybody who played Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition will remember there were a lot of feats. That's how Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition made its combat more interesting, was by adding feats. So while everybody could pick up a sword and hit somebody with it, fighters would get lots of feats, and they could specialize in what they did with them. So you could get 2 weapon style, where you lost the penalty for using a weapon in your other hand. You could take various feats which would allow you to compensate for only fighting with 1 sword. Instead of being able to carry a shield, you would get a bonus because you can dodge around more because you've got this feat. And one of the big ones that we liked as players in my group was cleave. Basically, if you hit a target with your weapon and killed them, you could activate cleave and then do a second attack against somebody next to them. So you're hacking your sword down through an enemy, you kill them, and you just carry on that blow to the next person. Just one big massive attack. And at higher levels you could get great cleave, which allowed you to continue that. As long as you killed each target, you could keep cleaving on and on and on. Now, these are slightly flawed, because essentially you can take cleave and you can use it with something like a dagger. So the idea of a big massive blow cutting down somebody, well, a dagger wouldn't really do that. So I can understand why they've changed this. But they have taken away this versatility, where a fighter could be using a longsword and have cleave and use that. Another fighter might have the one-handed combat, so be getting bonuses on their armor class because they're more nimble in combat, and different people using the same weapon could fight in different ways. Whereas this weapon mastery just allows everybody who picks up that particular weapon, so a longsword, a halberd, or whatever, and they just get access to that one feat, that one special ability with that weapon. Now, these special abilities are quite interesting. Mastery properties. We've got cleave. If you hit a creature with a melee attack using this weapon, you can make an attack roll with the weapon against a second creature within 5 feet of the first that was also within your reach. So that's slightly different from the 3rd edition one. The 3rd edition one, you had to kill the opponent and carry on your blow. Now cleave just lets you hit 2 people. As long as you hit the first attack, you can make a second attack against somebody else. We've got flex. When you hit with a melee attack using this weapon, you deal its versatile damage even if you're wielding one hand. So versatile weapons do a larger dice size if you're wielding them two-handed. If you've got this feat, then you can do that larger damage size just using one-handed. But it's still a random amount. You can still roll a 1 on the dice. Graze is quite a nice one. This isn't something I've really seen before. Graze is, if you miss an opponent, you still do your bonus damage. So if you're hitting with your strength and you've got +3 damage from your strength, then you attack and you miss, and instead of doing 1d8 +3 damage, for example, you'll just be doing 3 points of damage. So you still do some damage for missing. And I can see that being a massive advantage if you've got abilities which rely on you hitting. Further on, we've got Nick. You make the extra part of the light property you can make it as part of the attack action instead of a bonus action. So with light weapons, you get to make a second attack, but with Nick, you can make the attack with that same weapon twice, but also you can just use it as part of your attack. So you're not losing your bonus action. You can use that for something else. Kinda nice. Push, you can push an opponent away. Sap, you deal disadvantage to the opponent on their next attack. Slow, their movement is dropped by 10 feet. Topple, they need to make a DC test of Constitution or fall over. Vex, you have advantage on your next roll against them. So there's some interesting one there, but it's not a huge variety, and it really doesn't compensate for the way the old feats just made characters so interesting, because you could buy different feats and work them together to come up with a unique character with their own fighting style. Whereas this is, you pick up a longsword, you're this kind of fighter. I'm just not that excited by it. We've got a bunch of changes of spells here. I'm not terribly excited by any of them. I've looked through a few. They're fairly similar. This is just the small changes we get through these packages. There's a bunch of spells in here. I'm trying to think. There's a couple of interesting ones, but we're still dealing with things like the Warlock Eldritch Blast and stuff like that. We've got feats. So we've got some more epic boons. We've got the Weapon Master one, as I've discussed. Then we're on to Barbarians. Barbarians get access to the Weapon Mastery, but only for 2 weapons, and their rage has changed. Rage has changed, so it's something they maintain rather than something they're given. So in current edition, if you're in range, you need to be basically damaged. Somebody has to be doing something to you to keep you in your rage. Otherwise, you calm down and fall out of it. Whereas now barbarians, as long as they're attacking, will stay in it. But also, they can devote bonus actions to staying in a rage longer. So if they have to sprint across a room, they get to stay in the rage, even though they're out of combat for a round or 2. There's also various stuff about changing the way rage works, so you can get primal knowledge, where your bonuses to your rage you can still use on certain physical activities: acrobatics, intimidation, perception, stealth, or survival. So you're taking that barbarian rage and you're channeling it towards something apart from combat. An interesting little flexibility. They don't mention my personal bane that I've mentioned before, the bear aspect barbarian being able to half all damage except psychic. So I don't know whether they've fixed that yet. We know from the last one, or was it the one before that they kind of fixed the druid, and I was happy with that. We've got the fighters. There's some moving around here, slight changes, but the big change is the weapon mastery. We've got sorcerers. As I've said, there's some minor changes to spells. They're juggling things around. There's nothing too much. They are moving deck chairs on the Titanic. It's nothing exciting. They're just changing things to see if people will prefer it. I don't think any of these are absolutely massive improvements. The Warlocks, Wizards, and then on to the rules glossary. Well, they're kind of setting things back a bit. So we've got armor training, attack, moving between attacks, blind sight. These are all fairly familiar. D20 tests are back to just familiar, that a 20 means nothing on most tests, and a 1 means nothing. You don't automatically succeed if you roll a 20, you don't automatically fail on a 1. And your bonus inspiration, you no longer get on either of those. They've really reset it back to basics here. Expertise, fly speed, grappled condition, help, which I think's quite nice. Although it's mainly in 5th edition, they've kind of cleared it out a bit here, that people working together can get bonuses beyond that. And I think that really helps in group activities. I do like what they're doing there. Heroic advantage instead of inspiration. Hide actions, influence actions, incapacitated condition. knocking out a creature. This is again a very slight change in that when you strike a character and you're going to reduce it down to 0, you can instead decide to only reduce it down to a single hit point, so it's not getting worse because it's bleeding out, but you've knocked it unconscious. So you can decide to put an opponent down rather than kill them. And I do like this. You know, it changes people needing to be healed up if you're just taking them down. It also mentions that you can administer first aid and bring them back up almost straight away. We've got long rests, benefit of rests, interrupting rests here, magic actions, move actions, ritual casting, search. We've got the detailing of short rests, which hasn't changed much, study, swim speed, telepathy, teleportation, tool proficiencies, the tremor sense, true sight, unarmed strike, and unconscious. And that's 50 pages. Now, as I said, the main part is this weapon mastery, and I am very much underwhelmed by that. And there's a lot of minor changes with magic. This is, again, a very underwhelming playtest package. They're not trying anything truly exciting here. We've seen this stuff before. You know, we're reaching back to feats which were around 23 years ago when 3rd edition came out, and that's their great new idea. This feels very devoid of anything new. But anyway, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough as usual. So thank you very much for watching. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.